Hi, and welcome to the Thrive Alcohol Free podcast. I'm Dupe Witherick, alcohol free wellbeing and transformational coach, and the best selling author of A Cocktail of Clarity, How to Ditch Drinking, Embody a Joyful New Identity, and Thrive Alcohol Free. This podcast will show you that being alcohol-free is not what the traditional narrative says. And even though alcohol is so ingrained in our society that it is okay to give yourself permission to stop drinking if you want to. And you do not have to wait until you hit rock bottom. It is certainly not boring, and I believe ditching drinking is just the start to living an extraordinary life. By getting rid of this one thing, it allows the doors to open to endless possibilities and opportunities. Each week, we will have guests on who are at various stages of the alcohol-free journey, from those who are curious to those who have been alcohol-free for years. We will also have experts on talking about different topics relating to alcohol and beyond. Through these conversations, you will discover what it means to thrive alcohol-free. Enjoy. Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of the Thrive Alcohol Free podcast. I'm so pleased you are here and you are listening. I know you could be doing so much with your time, so I'm grateful that you have taken the time to listen to the podcast today. Well, I have had a really lovely week. It's been lots of fun. My in-person event to celebrate the 1-year anniversary of A Cocktail of Clarity was wonderful and just lots of fun. It was so great to see people and give people hugs. And William Porter, the author of Alcohol Explained, and Denise Hamilton Mace, the founder and editor of Lono Drinker magazine, joined me on a panel discussion. And yeah, it was lots of fun. So a couple of the takeaways, I gave an overview of the book and talked about what had happened since the book came out and the fact it had been so well received and so many people have gone out and got the book, and people really saw it as a tangible, practical guide, and a lot of people were sharing it. So people were sharing with friends and coaches were sharing with their clients, and so that was lovely to hear. So I talked about my experience of writing the book and then what it's done since, and yeah, it was just really great to take it in and to acknowledge the fact that it is out there, and I hope it continues to help people. So, and then on the panel, we talked about how rock bottoms are subjective, and that's absolutely true. You can be drinking very little and actually may come to the conclusion that actually you don't want to drink anymore. William shared very openly about his experience, and it was interesting to hear from others in terms of their experience with alcohol. And it was clear that the alcohol-free movement is growing and we're a powerful minority. We've made the choice and we're able to start that movement where we can call out if people are feeling like they're forced to drink or peer pressure. We're able to have the courage to take a stand and say, no, that's fine. It is possible to have fun. People aren't boring if they don't drink. It is a choice, and we should absolutely encourage people to do that, because no one should be forced to drink. No one can force you to drink. If you think that you can't stop drinking because your friends or your family will want you to drink and will question it, no one can force you to drink. So remember that and feel free to take a stand and make that choice. You can absolutely do that, and you can absolutely enjoy yourself when you are not drinking. So there were a couple of things that came up, and we had lots of food and we celebrated with my favorite fizz, Naughty, and Club Soda Tasting Room is fantastic venue, and if you haven't been there, then I definitely suggest you try that. And if you're curious about alcohol-free drinks, then definitely go to Club Soda Tasting Room in London, as they have such a wide selection of drinks for you to taste and try before you buy. And of course, the Lono Drinker magazine, which Denise Hamilton Mace is the founder of, then that's another place to go if you are looking for alcohol-free drinks and for inspiration. So you can get her magazine as well. So if you haven't got a copy of the book yet, then I have actually recorded a video, which is of chapter one, which includes why I wrote the book, why you should read the book, my story, as well as chapter one. So if you want a taster of the book before you go and buy it, then you can download that, and I'll leave the link in the show notes for you to get that, and you can see me reading the book. And then it was my birthday on Tuesday, so I had a wonderful day relaxing. My husband surprised me with a spa day. And so, yeah, I've had a really great week, and I had a well-deserved massage after my London marathon the week before. So I hope you've had a good week and you are feeling good this week. If not, there are lots of tools and things you can do. Breath work helps, just breathing, just remembering to breathe. Box breathing is a great trick, and it really helps reduce anxiety, or if you're feeling pressured and you just want to feel clear-headed. So box breathing, imagine if you've got a picture of a square in front of you, and you breathe in for 4, going up the side of the square, hold for 4, going across the square at the top, breathe out for 4, going down the square, and then hold for 4 again. And do that a few times, and you'll find that you suddenly feel a lot calmer. So if for any reason you are feeling a bit anxious or feeling a bit pressured this week, then why not try box breathing? And there are many other tools. And I actually have quite a few of the breathing techniques in my book, Cocktail of Clarity, as well. Anyway, we're going to keep on the theme of books and authors, because this week's guest is Clare Pooley. And so I'm delighted that Clare is a guest and we have a fantastic conversation. So Clare is an author, speaker, and blogger, and you may have read Clare's memoir, The Sober Diaries, which has helped thousands of people worldwide to quit drinking. She wrote her first novel, The Authenticity Project, and that was a BBC Radio 2 book club pick, a New York Times bestseller, and the winner of the RNA Debut Novel Award. And it's been translated into 29 languages. And since then, she's written 2 other novels, The People on Platform 5, and her latest book, How to Age Disgracefully, will be coming out in June. So it's fantastic to have Clare on, and we have a great chat. And so without further ado, here is my conversation with Clare. So welcome, Clare. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. And I'm so excited to be here. I met you about 6 months ago. And yeah, I've been wanting to do this ever since,
Oh,
because
so kind.
yeah, I think you're fab.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And I appreciate you being on. It's so exciting to have you here. So you are one of the key people, I would say, in the alcohol-free space who sort of started this, really, in terms of getting the message out there and making it a bit more common and giving people that knowledge, I think, in terms of stopping drinking. And yes, you go through life and things happen, of course, but on the whole, actually, the other side has been pretty good. And you've obviously written a number of books, which is fantastic. But for people who might not know who you are, which I can't imagine, but if they don't, could you maybe tell us a bit about yourself and how you came to write The Sober Diaries, which was obviously your original book?
Sure. It was quite a long time ago now. So I have to sort of take you back to 2015, which is 9 years ago. I can't believe that much time has passed. It's incredible. So 2015, I was a mum with 3 small kids. So 6, 8, and 11 they were. And my alcohol intake had sort of gradually built up over the years. And you'll know the story. You start drinking more and more and more, and your tolerance gets better or worse, whichever way you look at it. And I could drink a bottle of wine without it touching the sides by this stage. And I've totally bought into that whole wine o'clock thing, and me time. And I thought a glass of wine at the end of the day was the way that sort of I had my adult time and I got to relax. And but I poured pretty big glasses, and it wasn't just one glass, it was generally three glasses and three big glasses as a bottle. And yeah, it was all going slightly out of control. Anyway, I think the impact of all of that, and again, everyone will know this, the impact of all of that was that I was a terrible insomniac. I was really anxious and stressed a lot of the time, and I thought alcohol made that better, and of course it doesn't. It makes it a lot worse. I was about 2 stone overweight, and my whole life was sort of stuck in a rut, in that I just felt like I wasn't going anywhere, and I felt like I was a really bad mum as well. And yeah, I spent quite a lot of time trying to avoid my children and find a glass of wine instead. So it was all a bit of a mess. And I finally got to the stage 9 years ago where I tried and tried to moderate, and I'd done the same thing that I know, so many people do, which is set myself loads of rules. And I was like, I'm only going to drink at the weekends, or I'm only going to drink when I go out, or I'm only going to drink beer because that doesn't count, or whatever, all these rules. And I could never stick to them, or I stick to them for a short while and then they go out the window. And then finally 2015, it was March the 2nd, and I woke up with a terrible hangover because I'd had a birthday party the night before, and my kids were making a real racket, and I had a terrible hangover. And I knew that the only thing that would make me feel better is more alcohol. And I had this hard and fast rule that you don't drink before midday, because if you drink before midday, then you're an alcoholic. And wasn't an alcoholic, so I wasn't going to drink before midday. And it was 11:30, and I went into the cupboard. I found a bottle which had like 2 inches of red wine in it, and I poured it into a mug and I drank it, and I felt much better. And I poured it into this mug so the children wouldn't see that I was drinking wine at 11:30 in the morning. And then I looked at the mug and it said "The world's best mum." And I felt so ashamed of myself that I haven't had a drink since. So that was how I came to quit finally. But after probably 10 years of thinking that, maybe I should, and Googling, am I an alcoholic, and all of those sorts of things. And I was too ashamed to tell anyone about it. I didn't think that anyone was in the same sort of mess that I was. And I couldn't tell my GP, I couldn't tell my friends, I couldn't tell my husband. I certainly didn't want to go to AA in case I bumped into somebody or somebody saw me going in or whatever. But I knew I had to do something. So I started blogging as a sort of form of therapy, like writing a diary. And I called the blog "Mummy Was a Secret Drinker." And I wrote in it every single day about what I was going through and how I was feeling. And that blog sort of went viral, and I came across this whole community of people who were going through just the same thing as me. And eventually that blog became a memoir, which is called The Sober Diaries. So that sort of potted history of how I got to where I got to.
Oh, amazing. And I think so many mums feel the same, don't they? And there's this whole mummy wine culture, and we're all far too harsh on ourselves just anyway, regardless. We always think we're not doing the best job. And I think for you to see that mug and then think, I just can't even imagine the thoughts that went through your head that actually said, actually, that's enough, enough's enough, I'm done now. But I'd be curious, with you said 10 years for the previous 10 years, you were conscious of it, you were mindful. Were you moderating, or what do you think you were doing? What were you trying to do? Trying to moderate.
I sort of feel like it's really hard to give up drinking completely until you've been through the trying to moderate loop. And you write about this in your book. You sort of need to know right at your very core that you are not a moderator, and that moderation is not working for you, in order to finally decide that, abstinence, total abstinence, is the way forward. And it just took me a long time to get there. I was convinced that I would be able to find a way of drinking just the odd glass of wine here and there. And, but that's not the way I've ever been. I think there are two types of people in this world. There are moderators like my husband. He's a moderator, curse. And, like me and you, and we're all or nothing people. And, you know, there's good things about being all or nothing. It means we're the sort of people that throw ourselves into life and, like you running marathons, you don't just run, you run a bloody marathon, and, I didn't just drink, I drank a lot. And when I smoked, back in the dark ages, I didn't just smoke one or two, I smoked 2 packets, it's sort of, crisps. I can't eat one or two crisps. I have to eat the whole packet. So I think that's just the way I am about everything. So moderation just doesn't work for me. And once you understand that, then you can give up. Until then, there's always that little voice saying, "Oh, you've done so well. Now you can just have one."
Yeah, it's
And I
so
did that for a
true.
very long time.
So true. So for the person who's listening, who's maybe thinking, yeah, I have been round that loop before, and I'm still going round that loop. What tip would you give them if they are to sort of move to the actually let's take a break and maybe stop ultimately?
Oh, I tell you what, read. I wrote a blog post which is in my book as well. It's in the Sober Diaries, and it's called The Obstacle Course. And people have shared it over and over again on the internet. If you just Google Clare Pooley, The Obstacle Course, you can find it, I'm sure. And basically, I wrote it to address exactly this, is that because what the obstacle course talks about is the fact that when you carry on trying to quit and then stopping, or trying to moderate, you are doing the hard bits of not drinking over and over again, all those sort of white knuckle sort of, sitting on your hands, trying desperately hard not to have a glass of wine. I mean, those you're doing that again and again and again, and it's exhausting, and it means you're constantly thinking about alcohol. You're constantly thinking, am I going to drink tonight? Am I not going to drink tonight? What am I going to drink? How much am I going to drink? All those things, it sort of drives you crazy. And when you finally quit, when you've quit for a certain amount of time, I mean, probably about 100 days, you find that suddenly that voice starts going away, and you stop thinking about it all the time, and it gets so much easier. And it's just, the freedom you get from that is so much better than that constant feeling of trying to be good and trying fighting with yourself and with your own conscience. So yeah, I would just say it is much easier. It's harder to start with, but once you get past the initial few months, it is so much easier just not to drink at all.
Yeah,
Don't you agree?
it so is, and I do think it is the noise. It's that constant. It is you're constantly thinking about drinking, aren't you? It doesn't really go away if you're moderating. And I always think people, if you say that you can moderate, if someone is thinking, actually, I can moderate, then set some rules and see if you could actually follow those rules for a couple of weeks. If you can,
Exactly.
perfect. If you can't, maybe it's time to think about doing something different.
Um, think back to when you first started drinking, when you were much, much younger. When you don't have a problem with alcohol, you don't think about it. So those people who only drink a little bit every now and again, they're not thinking about it the rest of the time. It just doesn't cross their minds. If you are constantly thinking about drinking, then, it is a problem, and you'd be much better off just cutting it out of your life altogether.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always say you're not giving anything up, you're only gaining. And actually, by not drinking, you have a massive superpower and it makes you brave. So there's only positives to be had. And I think that probably goes up to, years. It's been 9 years since you stopped drinking. So what's happened since? And tell us a bit about that because it seems to have been an amazing journey.
Yeah, I mean, it totally changed my life in every way, really. There is not one thing I miss. So yeah, I just feel bad I didn't do it earlier. I sort of think, what could I have achieved in my life if I quit drinking at 30 instead of
Yeah.
46? So Yeah, so what happened since? So I wrote the blog, I published the Sober Diaries, which was really frightening at the time because, people weren't really talking back then about being sober, which is why I wanted to do it, because people still had this idea that you were either somebody who drank or you were a sad alcoholic who was going to be miserable for the rest of their lives and spend, several evenings a week in a church hall telling everybody how miserable they were. And there was nothing in between. And, I want to say, hang on, hang on. There is a whole area of, the whole group of people in the middle who don't fit the stereotype, but definitely have a problem. And we need to be talking about it. So anyway, so I published the book. And also there was nothing when I quit. There were lots of books about people's drinking stories. So lots of stories about, memoirs about how people have got into terrible problem with alcohol. And then they would get to the end and they'd say, and then I quit and now everything's much better. And I think, hold on, hold on. How did you quit? What
Yeah.
did you do? How long did it take? What's it feel like? I had
Yeah.
so many questions that I couldn't find answers to. So I wanted to write something that would answer some of those questions and tell people what it was like and say, actually, once you get through the hard bits, it is really good. You are not, as you say, you're not losing anything, you're only gaining. So yeah, so I published that book. And then by then, writing was like my new therapy and I think when you quit drinking, it leaves a big hole and you sort of need something to fill that with. And for me, it became writing. So I then took up novel writing and I'm just about to publish my third novel, which is really exciting.
Congratulations. It's really exciting.
So
Brilliant.
my relationships are much better. I have more money because I'm not spending it all on alcohol. I do a lot more things. I think when you drink, your life becomes very narrow because the only way you tend to relax and have fun is by doing something that involves drink. Whereas when you stop, you find more different things that you love doing. So I love to travel, I love to go to the theatre, I love going to concerts, I love walking. I mean, my life is so much richer than it was before. So yeah, loads of everything has changed. I've got much more varied friends because I used to choose my friends on the basis of how much they drank. So if somebody didn't drink as much as me, I think, God, they're boring. Whereas now I have friends who are, very different.
It's so funny, isn't it? It really it really is. I mean, I remember when I was drinking, if people said to me they weren't going to have a drink when I'd go out with them or whatever, or I'd meet someone, they were like, no, I don't drink. I'd be suspicious of them. I'd be like, what are you doing? And I'd be the one that would be trying to thrust a drink in their hands. And it's amazing how times have changed. So yeah, it's a lot of people worry about that though, don't they? They think about, if I were to stop drinking, what does that mean for my friendships? What does that mean for the people I spend
Yeah,
my
and
time with?
the interesting thing about that is the only people that will be bothered are the people that have a drink problem themselves.
Yeah,
Anyone who doesn't have an issue with drink doesn't care whether you drink or not. They really
yeah,
don't. That was a real revelation to me. You know,
so true.
even my friends who are still big drinkers have come to terms with the fact that I don't drink. But it took a little bit of time with them. But anybody else, anyone who doesn't have their own issues with drink doesn't care. They really
Yeah,
don't care.
yeah, it's true. I think we exacerbate it in our head, don't we,
Yeah,
beforehand,
yeah.
and we worry so much about it, and we think, and we care too much, I think, about what people think. But you're right, it is holding up a mirror to someone potentially, and so that's the reaction that you might get. But
Yeah, I think you have to remember that it's their problem and not your problem.
exactly,
So
exactly,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And generally,
And
we know that it's not the non-drinkers that's boring. It's the people who are drunk who are telling you the same story for the fifth time, and then can't remember ever having met you because they were too drunk. They've forgotten the whole event.
exactly, then they tell you the same story again. Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. But I imagine in those 9 years, I mean, even for me, 3.5 years down the line, it's changed so much, the whole alcohol-free space and people being more open about not drinking and wanting to share that and tell people how wonderful it is. And the number of alcohol-free drinks I mentioned to you, that I was a judge on the World Alcohol-Free Drinks Awards earlier this year, and in 9 years, I mean, there must be a massive contrast. I'd love to hear about that.
I mean, I'm so thrilled with how things have changed, because when I quit, there was only one alcohol-free beer. It was Beck's Blue. And I talk about it so much in the Sober Diaries. I've had people sort of on social media saying, she must have been sponsored by Beck's Blue. Which I wasn't. I really wasn't. They've never given me even a single free bottle of beer, which actually I think is a bit outrageous.
Shocking.
But now there are hundreds and hundreds of alcohol-free beers, and there's alcohol-free spirits, and there's wines. I mean, it's the biggest. It's such a fast-growing sector. If you go down to a supermarket now, you have a whole aisle of no and low alcohol. Whereas when I first quit, I would have to search out the one case of Beck's Blue, and it was generally right at floor level, covered in dust. And actually, once I was in Cornwall, and I was really excited because I found some Beck's Blue in the fridge. Oh no, not in the fridge, on a bottom shelf somewhere or something. And I took it to the cashier. And I was, really excited. And she said, "You do know this is alcohol free, don't you?" And I was like, "Yes, that's why I'm buying it." And I think they must have stocked it by accident. Because I don't think they did know.
Oh, that's so funny.
So that's changed. But also, the other big change is that when I quit, the only sort of the club soda actually came about the same time. But they were very new, and generally the only people talking about not drinking were Alcoholics Anonymous, and that was all very secretive, and it was all very shameful, and it was all about being anonymous and sort of nobody talking about it publicly. And so this whole thing felt really, it felt really shameful. It felt like it wasn't the sort of thing that you could celebrate. You could say I've quit smoking and everyone goes, yay, but you couldn't say I quit drinking, because they wouldn't, they just look at you rather strangely. And that's really changing. Instagram now is filled with people celebrating being sober. People are really open about it. They post about, and when I started my blog, it was anonymous because I didn't want anyone to know it was me. And now I think that's really sad. And now there are people who are all ages who are really happy to say, this is me and I don't drink. And that is just so fantastic and such a big change. I think it used to be that if you quit drinking, you did it because you had to, because you'd hit rock bottom and you were in such a dire state. And now I think it's being seen as being something that you do because you want to do it, not because you're at rock bottom, not because you've had an intervention and, but because you know that you will be happier and everyone around you will be happier if you don't drink.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think it's wonderful that it's not seen as a shameful thing now. I mean, I can imagine back 9 years ago, the thought of you writing that blog as Clare Pooley would have, well, it wasn't something you would do, so you didn't do it. But
I still remember when I was sort of finally outed, and I was terrified that people would hate me. And actually I realized that when you are really honest about what is really going on in your life, people are really kind, and then nobody has anything they can beat you around the head with. When I went on national TV and national radio talking about the fact that I used to drink ridiculous amounts of alcohol and I was a terrible mother, people were really, I had no trolling, because I think generally what can somebody hurl at you when you've already hurled it at yourself? They can't say, "Oh, you're a terrible mother," because you just go, "Yeah, I know. I confess. I really was a terrible mother." And they go, "You were a terrible lush. You drank way too much." It's like, "Yes, I know. I've already confessed to that too." And that makes you really brave, because you sort of think, there is nothing left that anyone can hurl at me that I haven't already hurled at myself publicly.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it was, I think in the end it was a really empowering thing to do. But yeah, the thought initially was quite terrifying.
Yeah, yeah. So inspiring. And I'd love to touch on all the books as well that you've written so far. So we'll come to that. But before that, there was one part, you bravely talked about your breast cancer journey in your book as well. So I'd love to maybe talk about that. One, in the sense that life happens, and just because you stop drinking, it doesn't mean things, it's all singing and dancing and everything's fine. But also with the recent studies and reports that have come through about the links with alcohol and breast cancer, and we know that alcohol, it can be linked to 200 illnesses, 7 types of cancers, but especially breast cancer, for from a female perspective, it'd be really good to just maybe talk about that a bit as
Yeah,
well.
I mean, I didn't know about the link between alcohol and breast cancer. And I think if I had read something at some point, I probably ignored it.
Mm.
Instead,
Yeah,
I focused on all that stuff about, oh, it's part of a Mediterranean diet and it's made from grapes. And, it's like,
it's good for you, good for your heart.
yeah. So I was completely unaware until I got breast cancer. And I was diagnosed with breast cancer about 7 months after I quit. And I am so glad that I wasn't drinking when I was diagnosed for many reasons. I mean, partly because I wouldn't have been able to cope. If I'd been drinking, the wheels all would have come off. I would have cried endlessly in front of my kids. I would have been a
Mm,
complete mess. I would have
mm,
dealt with it all by drinking more, and then I'd have to deal with the hangovers and the guilt and everything else on top of the cancer. And actually, I found that the process of getting sober, and so for those of you going through this now, just remember that what you're going through is actually a really good skill for dealing with anything that life throws at you. So all the things that you're learning when you give up drinking, all of that, taking life one day at a time, just focusing on the next 24 hours and getting through those, and all the sort of the things you have in your toolbox when you quit drinking that keep you distracted. I used to have a list of things that I would do if I got cravings. you know all of those things, all of those skills are really helpful when you're going through anything like a cancer diagnosis, problems with your children are having problems with your parents. My mother is very ill now, and I'm going through all the stress of that, and I am so much more able to deal with it myself and to help her because
mm,
I've been through quitting drinking. And yeah, it really does make you a superhero. It's
mm,
it's so I think I was able to cope with it a lot better. And also because alcohol and breast cancer, it's like drinking when you have breast cancer is like it's like pouring fuel onto a fire. And I would have been much I think I would have been in a much worse physical position if I was still drinking as well. So yeah, so for all those reasons, it was just such a relief that I'd quit drinking first. And I'm really pleased that finally people seem to be talking more about the link between breast cancer and alcohol. And I don't want to sort of shame anyone into quitting or make them feel bad about their drinking, because we've all been there.
mm,
But what I do want is for people to stop seeing alcohol as harmless. We see other
mm,
drugs, nicotine, heroin, cocaine.
mm, mm,
We see those as being harmful. And
mm,
if you do partake in any of those drugs, you do it very cautiously, if at all. And we should be the same about alcohol. We should treat it much more cautiously, because just like any other drug, it has huge detrimental effects. And I think we're only just starting to talk about that now. It used to be that people thought alcohol was in a completely different class of its own. It's the one that's absolutely fine. It just, you just have fun.
yeah, yeah,
It
absolutely.
it is fun in some ways, but it's also horribly addictive, as we all know, and it does have all sorts of health implications.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, lots of people separate them out, don't they? It's alcohol and drugs. It's not
Yeah,
all under the
exactly. And
same
alcohol is a
umbrella.
drug, the same as a toxic,
Exactly.
the same as all the others. It's only because of history that we treat it differently. If it came on the market now, it would, nobody would sell it. No.
Mm. Yeah, it's so true. And I think, again, it's really, as you say, it's not about pointing fingers or making people feel bad, but it is about making sure people are aware, because, as you say, lots of people aren't aware of those links and think that it's
Yeah.
nothing to do with
And
alcohol.
anyone who has a family history of breast cancer, or anyone who's had breast cancer and doesn't want it to come back, for those people particularly, it's really important that they know. When I said, after I finished my breast cancer treatment, I said to the doctors and nurses, what can I do to make sure I don't have to go through this again? And they said, oh, just live your life and forget about it. And I was like, no, 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 I really want to know, what can I do differently? And nobody
Mm.
said don't drink, nobody.
Yeah.
Or at least don't drink much, which they were
Mm.
saying.
Mm. Yeah, I think there's still work to be done in the medical profession and healthcare in terms of education. I have a GP friend who, I remember, she said to me, people only are classed as having a problem with alcohol if they're drinking a bottle of vodka a day. That was their
Yeah,
benchmark.
yeah.
And
It's
so
like,
you're
no,
like, wow.
when my book first came out, they serialized it in the Daily Mail, of all places. And I was reading some of the Mail Online comments, and you can imagine. And there was this guy, one who really made me laugh, is this Irish guy. And he said, oh, no, no, sorry, he was Glaswegian. And
Mm.
he goes, a bottle of wine a day in Glasgow, we call that breakfast.
Exactly, exactly. So, I mean, it's a spectrum, isn't it? And I do think, and I do think it's important to highlight that we can all measure ourselves and say, okay, well, I'm not that bad. I'm not drinking that much. I'm only drinking X, Y, and Z. But regardless, I think personally that if you think in some way life can be better, spiritually, emotionally, physically, mentally, without alcohol, even if you're drinking a glass of wine a week, then you can give yourself permission to stop. You don't have to wait until you get to the point of
Yeah, I
drinking
think
bottles and bottles.
part of the problem is the word alcoholic, because I spent 10 years asking myself the wrong question. Because I spent 10 years asking myself, am I an alcoholic? Because if I'm an alcoholic, I have to stop. And if I'm not, I
Yeah,
don't have to, because I'm
yeah,
fine. And then I would do all these little quizzes online that sort of, are you an alcoholic? Do you drink in the morning? Do you have blackouts? So, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they'd never really give me a straight answer, even after I'd answered all the stupid questions. And it took me a long time to realize I was asking the wrong question. And the question isn't, are you an alcoholic? Because it's not black and white like that. It's a very much shade of gray. And there's an alcoholic as a, it's an unnecessary term. You're an addict. Anyway, I was asking myself the wrong question. The question should have been, is alcohol doing me any good, or is it actually causing me problems? And if it's the latter rather than the former, then you'd be better off without it. So yeah, we need to ask the right question.
yeah, definitely. Definitely. Well, thank you so much for sharing so vulnerably, because it couldn't have been easy to write your journey in your book and then keep talking about it and everything else. But yeah, I just love the fact you've been so open, and I'm sure it's helped so many people.
Well, as have you. So, and I'm just so pleased that people like you are talking about it, because yeah, the more they say, what is it? What's that saying? You can't be what you can't see. If
Yeah,
it's really difficult to imagine what life is like sober if you don't see people who are sober going out
yeah,
and enjoying life. And people look at you and they think, yeah, I could be like that.
yeah. Thank you.
So, hooray for you.
Yay. Hooray for us both. Well, I'd love to talk because obviously, years have gone, but since then you've had three other books come out. So do you want to talk a bit about that? You've got your new one that's just been released, and so I'd love you to talk a bit about that and
Yeah, I mean,
what some people
my
find that.
first novel was which was published in 2020, was very much sort of based on my own experience because it was called The Authenticity Project, and the story is about what happens when you tell the real truth about your life, which is obviously what I'd done. And it's about a notebook which an old man writes in. He tells a story about his life and the real truth about his life, and he leaves the book in a cafe where it's found by the cafe owner who reads his story, decides to track him down and try and change his life. And in turn, she writes her own truth in the book and leaves it somewhere else. So this book of truths is passed between six completely different people who all end up meeting each other and changing each other's lives in extraordinary ways. So it's sort of about the magic that happens when you're really honest about what's going on in your life. And obviously, one of the characters in the book is an addict. So he's called Hazard and he's addicted to cocaine and alcohol. And the journey that he goes through in the book is very much what I went through. So it's sort of semi-autobiographical, that story. So that was my first book, which was translated into 30 languages and was a New York
Wow.
Times bestseller. And yeah, it was sort of, it was quite a dream, really. So then I went on to publish a book called The People on Platform 5, unless you're in America, in which case it's called Iona Iverson's Rules for Commuting, because for some reason titles
Yeah,
change in different markets.
yeah.
And that's about commuters on a commuter train from Hampton Court to Waterloo, and it's about the extraordinary things that happen when strangers start talking to each other on public transport.
Which people
And
never do.
exactly, which you normally never do. And in this case, because of a near-death experience, a bunch of commuters actually start talking, and it leads to extraordinary things. And then my new book, which comes out in June, yay, is called How to Age Disgracefully. And it's about a bunch of very badly behaved senior citizens and who join together with a single father and his young child from the nursery next door and a mangy dog and get up to all sorts of hijinks. So so and it's quite fun. Yeah, it's a comedy. So there
Yeah.
we go. That's it. So
Oh, amazing. And how have you found writing? Because you must enjoy it so much to have written four books. And I know we talked about being all or nothing people, and so your all or nothing is writing lots of books, which is fantastic. But what have you found? Have you found anything challenging about it? And what have you enjoyed most about being an author, Claire?
yeah, I mean, it is challenging. It's a roller coaster, you know. I mean, there are times when you think, yay, this is all brilliant and I'm a genius. And there are times when you think, this is terrible. Nobody's ever going to want to write and read a single word that I write, and it's all rubbish. So it's not always easy, but it is the best job in the world in that, just the being able to just spend. I tell you what it is. Every now and again I'll say to my kids, sorry, I can't do X, Y, or Z because mummy's working, and they go, "Mummy, making up stories is not a proper job," and they're absolutely right. I mean, it's not a proper job. It's just great fun. I mean, it's being
Yeah.
able to make money from just creating imaginary characters and places and scenarios, and is a joy. So
Mm.
and I feel that having spent so long with the wine witch in my head, this constant voice talking about alcohol, now I spend the whole time with these imaginary places and people and things in my head that I can mold and have fun with. And my head is a very different place from where it was 10 years ago.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. Well, thank you for writing and keeping writing. The books are amazing, and I'm sure your latest one will be a huge hit as well.
I'm excited about reading your new one. So, so you need to get on and write it.
Yeah, we'll see. Okay. It will come at some point, maybe. Okay, thank you. So I always end the podcast with asking our guests, what does thriving alcohol-free mean to you? So Claire, I'd love to hear your answer.
Oh, what does thriving alcohol free mean for me? You know what? I think all sorts of things, but the main one for me is freedom. And you know, if you've been addicted to alcohol, you know how it feels when you just have, we've talked about it a lot over the last sort of half hour or so, but that constant voice in your head, and the freedom of not having that anymore, having so much more space, energy, time to do your own thing and to create and to enjoy life to the full is just wonderful, magical. So yes, freedom.
Love that answer. Well, thank you. And I couldn't agree more. It really is. It's an amazing thing. And I do wonder why more people don't do it, really. So
Well,
jump on this bandwagon.
my kids' generation, they don't drink as much. I mean, they do,
That's
they drink
true.
from time to time, but they don't drink the way we
Mm,
did.
yeah,
Uh,
you're right.
so my generation, when I was at university, I didn't know one single person who didn't drink. Whereas,
Yeah,
my daughter's now at uni, and my eldest, and she knows loads of people who don't drink or don't
yeah,
drink much.
yeah. It's
I think
amazing.
they
I was
do
on a
other stuff probably, but they're not drinking.
probably.
Because drinking
Absolutely.
is a Facebook, it's for old people.
It's so true. I was having this conversation. I was on a podcast, was it yesterday, 2 days ago? And it came up for me because I think that's where my initial view of alcohol came from. I remember being in my halls of residence that first year, and there were two people who didn't drink. And in my eyes, they were ostracized. No one talked to them. Everyone thought they were a bit weird. They were boring. And so my whole perception of if you don't drink, you're not going to be part of the gang obviously was the start of
Yeah.
everything. And so I'm really pleased to hear that, universities are different, Freshers Week are different. I'm hearing that there are alcohol-free options for freshers now, and people are a lot more conscious of it. And it's great. It's great that things have changed so much in 20 odd years. So yeah, excited for that. Okay, well, thank you again. Are there any last words of wisdom that you want to share with the listener?
Oh, just that if you are right at the beginning of this, I'm going to use the American expression, this journey. If you're right at the beginning of this journey, try not to be scared. I was terrified, but try to be excited, because that will make it all much easier. If you can be really excited about the things that are ahead of you, and you should be excited, then that will get you through. So don't be scared, be excited.
Love that. Love that. Absolutely. Well, thank you again for being such a fabulous guest and coming on the podcast. It's been really lovely to
I've
talk to
really
you.
enjoyed it. Thank you, thank you.
And I'll speak to you soon. Take care. Thank you.
Marathon as well. I'll be cheering you on.
Oh, thank you so much.
Oh,
Well, thank you, Claire. It was so lovely to speak to you. I really enjoyed our conversation. And I love what you said about what does thriving alcohol-free mean to you. And it's the freedom of having so much more space, energy, and time to create and enjoy life, which is fantastic and a really, really great way of putting it. So, thank you again for being an amazing guest. So, I do hope you have enjoyed this episode. And as always, feel free to get in touch if you have any questions or if you would like to hear about something specific on the podcast, or you have any guests that you would like to be on the podcast, then just let me know. Okay, so I hope you have the most wonderful week and enjoy it. And if you are curious about becoming alcohol free, then stay tuned. I have something that I will be announcing in the next couple of weeks, which you might find helpful. Okay, well, I look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Take care. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to the Thrive Alcohol Free podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe so you get alerted every time I drop a new episode. I'd love it if you could rate, review, and share this episode. Feel free to tag me on Instagram at Thrive Alcohol Free and follow me for daily tips. If you would like to work with me, I offer one-to-one coaching sessions and have my signature group coaching program. If you're not yet ready for coaching, I also have a self-paced online course, which is a companion to my book, A Cocktail of Clarity. All the links are in the show notes. I will see you in the next episode. Have a wonderful week. Take care.